Well, the closings are done, and I have things to say, as you probably thought I would. Hi, Tony DeWitt here. I'm a Missouri appellate attorney, retired, and I bring you a fresh perspective on the law without offering any legal advice. So pull up a chair. This is what we're discussing today. The prosecutor's closing today was, I thought, reasonably well done. Like I said in my post, I'd give it a B plus. It was a lot slower than I've seen closings done. It didn't The pacing of it was a lot longer than it needed to be. There were larger pauses between different points. Perhaps that was, to let things sink in. I don't know. I think that's not a very effective strategy myself, but, you know, everybody has to do things the way they feel the most comfortable. And I also thought it was too long. I thought she could have condensed a lot of that. The jury heard all of the evidence, and the points that she raised were pretty good. Let's take a look at this first point. In this first point, she tells the jurors how all of the witnesses were right to expect that something was going to happen.
Adam told us he went back and talked to his mother, and he confronted her about this. And he told his mother, Lori and Alex conspired to kill Charles. He knew, and he was right. Lori's ex-friend, Christina Atwood, she told you about that very uncomfortable dinner on June 9th, a month before the murder, where Alex Cox was talking about just wanting to kill Charles. He said this multiple times, and this defendant didn't care. In fact, she talked about how she had been drugging Charles. Christina told you she was so disturbed by this, she actually went and saw Lori the next day, June 10th, and told her, if something happens to Charles, I'm going to have to go to the police. Christina knew. She was right. And Nancy Jo Hancock, now she had just met Charles a few days before, and they had talked and texted and had been on the phone for hours, you heard. Charles had told her all about Lori, the things she was saying, the things she was doing. She told you that she knew that Charles was concerned for his own safety. And she understood the motive. She told Charles the night before, you probably should just tell Lori that you've changed the beneficiary, that she's no longer going to get that money. Nancy Jo knew, and she was right.
That was pretty well done. In this next clip, she talks about how Alex brought the gun to the house, and that was for only one reason.
Lori, that Zach and Adam are still at her house. They're going to go stay at Mimi's. And she even tells him that Adam is still waiting for Alex to get back to him. Still, he doesn't understand. Why isn't my brother responding to me? I was supposed to stay there. And again, what does Adam bring over? Gun and a garbage bag of clothes. That's all he needs to be part of the mission. When we get to July 11th, we still have Lori talking with Chad. We see those text messages going back between them. And then we start learning from the GPS from Charles Vallow's phone as he arrives. 7:35 a.m., he arrives at 5531 South Four Peaks. That's where we have at 7:36, Adam texting Charles. They are planning something. There is no reason why Alex should be there. And that explains why Alex wasn't responding to me and didn't let me stay there. We see that last outgoing text message by Charles Vallow at 7:37. And in fact, what we see is at 7:37 and 12 seconds, Charles sends out his last outgoing message. And at 7:37 and 29 seconds, There's an incoming message from Adam. It's not read until 12:13 p.m. What becomes important here is in this timeline, how long is Charles at the residence here? You hear in her interview how she says it's so fast. Charles comes inside. He's angry. He's jerky. And she tells him, take JJ. Go get him Burger King. They get JJ out to the car. And then she holds onto the phone. And this argument erupts, and it's just so fast. But what we know is it's actually 12 minutes long. This is not a fast incident. In this 12 minutes, Lori Vallow and her brother Alex Cox are doing their mission, and they are being like Nephi. We know at 7:49, it's over. Lori has left in Charles Vallow's car with his phone and JJ and Tylee.
In this clip, she is going to show us again that the purpose of all of this was to eliminate Charles. And she brings up this evil spirit, Ned, that supposedly inhabited Charles' body.
Do you recall Lori Vallow telling you that her husband Charles was no longer Charles, that he was now this possessed person?
Yes.
When Lori was talking to you about Ned, was she explaining that this evil spirit was now in the body of her husband?
I don't know if she used those exact terms, but that was the impression I got. Yes.
So the word she used expressed to you that idea that this evil spirit Ned was now in her husband's body.
Yes.
The other thing that Serena Sharp told us was Lori using that term zombie. You remember how upset the defendant got by her saying that. But again, why would Serena make up any of this? She has no reason to. What she recalls is that that is a term that this defendant used when speaking of people like her husband who were possessed by these evil spirits. We heard from Christina Atwood as well, the same concept that Lori Vallow repeatedly would say. Did she tell you, as well as the other women who were at this meeting in February, that her husband was possessed?
Yes.
So it wasn't just you in a private conversation.
Correct.
She was open about it.
Yes.
So again, we see this ongoing timing of Lori Vallow talking of her evil, dark husband, who she later.
She's moving into the last 20 or so minutes of her closing now, and she talks about the words and actions in the conspiracy.
As we again look at this in this conspiracy, again, we're looking at the same words and actions. March, Charles is no longer there. There's just an evil spirit in his body. June, Charles is still possessed, and now Alex is saying he wants to kill him. Lori is fine with this, and she says she's drugging him or had been drugging him. And then 2 weeks before, all of a sudden, Charles knows Lori's been having this affair. Lori's words, actions, motive, and the physical evidence.
The most important part of the opening part of, I should say, the primary closing of the prosecution is to give the ask, is to ask the jury to convict. And in this part, I thought she did really, really well.
Creating the one and only reason why Charles stayed inside the house, why he didn't just take JJ to school. The 12 minutes that Charles is at the house before Lori leaves in the car, the 47 minutes after that before they call 911, her demeanor, when she comes back, not caring that anyone has been hurt, her demeanor on the body-worn camera, during her interview, what you heard about during the drive. Think about her credibility, how she cried for you in her opening statement. You certainly didn't see her cry on that body camera footage. You didn't hear about her crying as she was being driven to the Family Advocacy Center, and you did not see her cry in her interview. Finally, think about the physical evidence that proves that Lori and Alex staged this scene, that Charles was never in possession of that bat when he was shot by Alex or either of the shots, that instead he was executed that day for this defendant's benefit. The physical evidence disproves beyond a reasonable doubt that Lori Vallow and Alex Cox were justified under the law in killing Charles. The jury instructions tell you to use reason, common sense, and experience. Charles Vallow is dead today because this defendant and her brother Alex Cox conspired to kill him. They planned it out, and they had their weapons, and they orchestrated a way to ensure that Charles was back in the house where he was shot and killed for money and Chad Daybell. The evidence proves to you that Lori Vallow Daybell is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and the state asks you to hold her accountable and find her guilty. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take our 15-minute afternoon recess.
Well, in every case, the defendant gets an opportunity to have a go at things, and she had a go here. Let's listen to how she opened, at least with respect to the jury instruction.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state of Arizona has the 100% burden of proving that I committed a crime, a grievous crime, conspiracy to commit premeditated murder of my husband, Charles Vallow. The state has the burden of proving to you that this event was not self-defense. In your jury instruction under the instruction, use of force and crime prevention, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, then you must find the defendant not guilty. In the law, under your jury instruction titled Justification for Defense of a Third Party, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, you must find the defendant not guilty.
When the first thing you have to do is argue the last sentence of a jury instruction to essentially tell the jury, in effect, to ignore all of the evidence, just look at the instruction, I think that's a particularly ineffective way to get your point across that you might somehow be innocent. And that's especially true here, where the state did a pretty good job of summarizing the evidence against her. Because she didn't testify, she tried to make up for that on closing argument. And you can't do that. You can't tell the jury things that you didn't give them in terms of evidence, because the statements of the parties on closing are not evidence. But that didn't stop her. Let's watch.
You did not see Tylee's interview, but we did learn from Detective Inklin that she did an interview that morning as well. You did not see Alex's interview, but we learned that Alex was interviewed that morning by Detective Moffett, the original case agent, whom we did not hear from in this trial. The state chose not to show you those interviews or let you listen to the 911 call.
The jury shall disregard that last statement. Okay, the jury can only consider what was admitted into evidence.
We learned in this trial from Officer Kautheim's testimony that Alex was injured on the back of his head with a bump and, according to his testimony, a 1-inch laceration. We did not see those pictures documenting that injury as well.
But I think probably one of the worst mistakes that she made, in addition to breaking the rules again, which you'll see here, is to call this a family tragedy. Let's watch.
Self-defense and a tragic family event. We learned in this trial that Charles and I were obviously having marital problems. Regardless of what was happening in our marriage at the time, on July 11th, this was self-defense. When Tylee came out with the bat to protect me, her mother, Charles did not have to take the bat from Tylee and start swinging. At 62 years old, Charles had a choice that day and could have put the bat down. A 2-minute period changed our lives forever. How are you supposed to choose between 3 people you love? Your husband, your daughter, your brother?
All right, hold on. All right, I'll caution the defendant not to testify about things that were not entered into evidence.
My old boss used to say that when somebody made a terrible mistake like that you should take that, roll it really tight, and shove it right up their nose. Except he didn't say nose. But the bottom line is that when somebody makes a mistake, you capitalize on it. And that's exactly what the prosecution did here.
The execution of Charles Vallow is not a family tragedy. There is nothing that you can say about shooting a man as he lay on the ground that you can try to construe in any way to make that a family tragedy. This case is about the defendant, not Alex Cox. Alex is involved in it because that is her co-conspirator. We are not here to determine his guilt, albeit it is quite obvious. This defendant wants you to just look at one piece, and she wants you to hope that there's only a person who will say, I saw, I heard the conspiracy. But what did you hear in every instruction is that you can look to other evidence to show that. This defendant wants you to forget about her words and pretend that when she told her lover, her soon-to-be husband, we got rid of him, that he changed the life insurance before we got rid of him, that somehow means what?
I will be surprised, in fact, I'll be amazed if the jury verdict doesn't come in before I get this video uploaded tonight. Hopefully that was helpful and useful to the people who've watched this. Thanks for being here. That's what I have for you today. I hope you found it helpful, interesting, or maybe both. If there's a subject you'd like me to discuss, please feel free to send me an email at the address above. If you like what we do, please feel free to subscribe and come on back to the beach tomorrow. I release videos every weekday, weather and work permitting. If you have the opportunity today, do a kindness for your fellow man. It makes the world a better place, one kind act at a time. And now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine that you might like.